Before beginning a new task, make sure everyone has filled out or gone over the tailgate you have planned for your activities for the day. If you haven't already gone over it, on the boat you'll find a book containing guidelines for how to perform a hip tow operation or any barge operations involving the bay boats. Take a look and go over with your captain the tactics to be done for the day. Before you leave, make sure you have all the lines and all the equipment you'll need to perform this operation or any others you have planned for the day. You may be using a mini barge that's already on anchor. If this is the case, use the lines that are provided on the mini barge to get yourself secured while you hook up the correct lines. Hook up at least a bow and a stern line to keep yourself secured while you hook up the rest of your mini barge tow lines. When you have the barge alongside and you're ready to begin hooking up your lines, make sure to turn the capstan switch on the hydraulics on the panel below the driver's seat. The first line you will hook up is a spring line. This line gives you some control over the mini barge and allows you to start towing if the mini barge is not on the anchor and you need to move it. This line goes forward of amidships on the boat and goes to the mini barge at midships or behind midship. This gives you some control over the barge and allows you to start towing forward while keeping it next to you. The next line will be the bow line. This goes to the outboard side of the mini barge, goes through the bullnose or through the bow of the bay boat, and goes to the outboard cleat on the bay boat. If you have two lines that are going on the same cleat, you can use what's known as dipping the eye. This is where you pass one line underneath and through the eye of the second line, allowing you to remove either line when it comes time to cut your lines loose. When pulling in the bow line, make sure it's good and tight so that your bows are towed in together or pointed towards each other. That way when you suck up the stern, it'll tighten the bow line. The third line will be the stern line. This goes to the outside of the mini barge, goes through the eye of the stern cleat, across the deck, and over to the capstan where it will be tightened up and cleated off. It's a good idea if you're not sure to double check and make sure you know which way the capstan will be turning before you put your line on so that you can suck it in and tight it off. Put at least 2 wraps around the capstan and 1 loop around the cleat while you use your foot to press the switch and tighten the capstan. Use spotters to tell you when the line is tight enough and the boats are pulled in next to each other. The barge and boat should still be towed in slightly, where the bows are a little bit together. This gives you better control and allows you to turn easier. If it's too tight, you may need to loosen your bow line just a little bit. Cleating off after a capstan, make sure you do at least a full wrap around the cleat, 2 figure eights, and then at least 1 half hitch to make sure it stays secure. If you have extra line on deck, make sure it's coiled up and stowed out of the way to avoid a tripping hazard. The fourth and final line is another spring line which acts as a brake line. This one goes forward on the mini barge and goes behind midships on the boat. This line will also go to a capstan, utilizing the one that is next to the mini barge. Make sure to do 2 wraps around the capstan and make sure you have a bite on the cleat you'll be using to tie it off. As you tighten this line in, it will suck in your forward spring line as well as tighten up the bow and stern lines, making the barge nice and secure to the side of the bay boat. Once all of your lines are tightened and secure, you're ready to unhook from the anchor if the mini barge is still tied up. Drop the 2 mooring lines off of the bow cleats and back away to make sure you don't get anything fouled in the props. Inspect and regularly monitor your lines to make sure everything remains tight, nothing is chafing, and everything looks okay. When towing a mini barge on the hip, you'll notice that the boat wants to turn towards the mini barge. You can compensate for this by using the engine that is closest to the barge, counteracting some of the drag. If you're putting the barge back on the anchor, have one person on the bow of the barge with a pike pole ready to grab the mooring lines, while another person is giving the driver direction. Signal the boat operator when you're close enough so you don't run over the lines or run the barge over the buoys. Hook both mooring lines over the forward cleats on the mini barge. Then you're ready to disconnect your lines and back away. Start by untying the bow, and then move on to the two lines that are tied to the capstans. First, loosen them from the capstans and the cleats, then remove them from the mini barge. If necessary, you can use the tie-up lines that are on the mini barge to secure it next to the boat while you disconnect the rest of the lines so you don't drift away. Make sure everyone is aware of the procedures for disconnecting lines so that no one is left on the mini barge when all the lines are cut loose and the boat is ready to drive away. When everyone is aboard, disconnect the final lines and back away from the mini barge, and you're finished with your tactic. As always, make sure your lines are coiled and put away properly to make sure they are ready for the next tactic and to keep them from becoming a tripping hazard. Coiling a longer line can be a little bit of a challenge. Make large loops, make sure that you have enough of a tail to coil your ends properly. When you are finished, you should be able to have plenty to tie it onto the rail and have it ready to go for a future use. Make sure to ask your instructor if you have any questions on how to properly coil and stow lines, as this is a very important part of becoming a proficient deckhand. Make sure all the lines are properly secured on the side of the boat so they are out of the way, won't get damaged, and don't provide a tripping hazard. When you're done with your work on deck, make sure to turn off all of your hydraulics. Make sure all lines are clear and back away from the mini barge. Make sure you update your log with the time and tactics you've been performing to complete your light-off sheet. If you're ready to head in, check with your captain, see which side he needs lines and buoys tied up so you're ready to pull into the dock.